Nuxt 3 has introduced a new kid on the block for our server side named Nitro. Let's go and see the fastest way that we can get our API up and running on Azure. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever it is that I find you, and welcome along to the channel. So today we're discussing our Jamstack backend and specifically deploying a Nitro backend to the Azure cloud in the quickest way that we can do it. So some reasons why you might want to deploy your backend separately from your front end to the cloud. You might want to scale your backend independently of your front end. So if your backend is supporting, say, multiple front ends or multiple technologies, so maybe a mobile site as well as a desktop website, you might want to be able to scale that. So you might want more instances of your backend independently of your front end. You might also just want a quick and dirty deployment that's not necessarily tied to your CI/CD pipeline. So CI/CD takes time to set that up and get that right. You might just want to be deploying this, standing it up for some reason like a demo or testing, and then tearing it down afterwards. You might also not want your deployment environment tied to source control commits. So you might just want to be able to deploy as and when you feel like it and have the code rolling independently of that. So let's jump over and have a look at what we've got. So here we are in Visual Studio Code, and I've got my Nuxt application, and inside my Nuxt application I've got a server and some routes and an API folder. So within that folder I've got a posts file that just contains some data that I want to serve up, and also a posts TypeScript file that handles basically the posts URL and returns just the content of that file. So I've run this up. So if I go to the API and then posts, you see that my server backend is serving up that entire JSON file. I've also got some other URLs in here to enable me to get an individual post. So I can get post with an ID, and there's 100 posts in that file. So as long as I'm getting something within 100, then I get a good response. So that's my API. So now how do we get this across into Azure? So let's go and have a look. The first thing we need to do is make sure that we've got the Azure App Services extension installed. So without that, all I can do inside Visual Studio Code is refresh the app services that are there, and at the moment you can see that I've got none running in my subscription. So let's go and get the Azure App Service extension and install that. So then we can jump back over here, and now I get these options to create a new web app. So I'm going to create a new web app, and I'm going to call it Nitro Test. And yes, I'm going to create a new resource group, and we'll call that the same. I'm going to use Node 16, I'm going to use Linux, and I'm going to do West Europe, and I'm going to create a new service plan. That's the name of the plan, and I'm going to go on the free, try it out at no cost option. And I don't want anything to do with application insights. I don't need any of that. So that's going to go away and create and provision my new app service. So let's jump back over to the code, and I'm going to stop my site, and I'm going to do a build, and this is going to create me an output folder, and inside the output folder we'll see it's going to create me a server folder, and that is basically our API. That is our Nitro backend. So there we see it's built our server folder, and we've got our index file, which is going to be the entry point for the module, and we've also got some node modules here. Now you'd think that the easiest way to then go and deploy this would be to go and say deploy to web app, but unfortunately that doesn't work because the deploy to web app omits the node modules folder. from the deployment that it makes. So then when you go and run your API, everything's missing. So because of that, we are going to go a different route and install an FTP plugin. So we're going to install FTP Simple. So let's install that. And then what we can do in our Azure App Service is we can browse and open this in the portal. And then we want to go to Deployment Center and FTPS credentials. So here you can see it gives you the URL where you can upload using FTP. It also gives you the credentials that you can use to log in using FTP. So we're going to come back to those. So let's go and initialize FTP Simple. So we do that using the command prompt, and if you start typing FTP Simple, you'll see there's a config option. So we can do that, and that gives us the start point for a config option. And as you can see, I've done this before, so I've created one that's called Azure App Service just as an example, and I've copied out this particular URL, so I'll just do it again here for completeness. So you get that from the Azure portal, put that into the host. You want port 21, you want type FTP, the username again. Well, while we're here, the end of that URL has got site www root on it, so that has to go into the path. We don't need secure, we don't need autosave, so i.e. when you save something it will automatically FTP this up. That's not what we want. We want control over this, and this is just about confirming if there's any duplicates that it will overwrite them or not. So we can also copy the credentials, so I'm going to have to do that because I think they've probably changed since I last did that. So just a word of caution here, you'll see that when you copy it, it only puts a single slash in, so you need the double slash to make this work. And let's just copy that password in, and we can then save that. So that is that configured. So then we can come over to our server folder, right click on that and do upload to FTP server. And we want server but excluding the directory, so we want everything from server beneath it. So we pick that one, we pick our Azure App Service that we just configured for FTP Simple. We are going to deploy it into the default site www root folder, and we can come over to the output and select the FTP Simple in the drop down, and you should see everything uploading as you would expect, including, as you can see here, the node modules folder. So that's all uploaded. So the last piece of the puzzle is to come over to the configuration section of your application, and in general settings you've got this startup command, and to actually start up your API you need to run node and point it at the index module as being the thing that you want to run. So let's go and do that, and this is the same as if you were running it locally as well. You could do that in a terminal. So I could come over here and go into the output folder and the server folder and do a node on that, and you'll see that that comes up listening on localhost 3000. I can then come over to the browser and let's just refresh that, and again that has correctly brought up the API. So this is exactly how we're now running it inside of Azure. So now that we've got that configured, we can come over to our Nitro test to get the actual URL. So let's click on that, open that up, go to API posts, and we get our data being served up from Nitro in the Azure cloud on Azure App Service. So that's it for this video. We've got our Azure API up and running in probably less than 10 minutes from source code to cloud deployed. Hopefully you found this useful, and if you did, then please do like the video so that more people can find it, and also consider subscribing to the channel so that you can get more tips and tricks and tutorials like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.